Ebro, Laura, and Rosenberg. Ebro is getting his knee replaced, but it is Rosenberg and Laura Stiles. And very excited to have Nick Barili on the program. De La
Yay!
Calle just dropped on Paramount. We're about to tell you what that is and break it all down. But Nick, you've been putting it down for a very long time. Hard Knock TV, the first ever hip hop channel on YouTube. So congrats on how you transitioned a YouTube channel a long time ago into all this success, including this new series on the Latino origins of hip hop.
What up? What up? How y'all doing?
Chilling, man. So tell us about De La Calle.
De La Calle started off as a concept 10 years ago. It started off as a doc. I wanted to do a documentary telling the stories of Latinos' contributions to hip hop because, as you mentioned, running Hard Knock for the last almost 20 years, I just felt like a lot of our stories weren't really being told. So I was like, man, I'm going to take it upon myself to help tell the story. So it evolved from that to I partnered up with a production company that did Anthony Bourdain's show, and we turned it into a travel series where I just kind of mapped out not only Latinos' contributions to hip hop in New York, but also how those seeds went to different places in Latin America, were mixed up with like local cultures and different sounds. And then kind of, if you want to call it a gumbo, was made in all these different cities and countries that then evolved into what we now call reggaeton and Latin trap and bachata and a bunch of different genres.
Now, this is really special because I was with Nick for the Tribeca Film Festival when we premiered the first or sneak peek of the first episode, right? And it was really exciting. And again, thank you, Nick, for having me. We had such a great time.
Thank you for hosting that. You're an amazing host.
But so now 8 episodes are officially out because I am excited. The
All
first
on
one,
Paramount Plus.
Yeah, the first one is Rosenberg, you're gonna love it. It is so dope, and he gets really, really up close and personal with N.O.R.E. Fat Joe is in it, Residente, and then of course the Nicky Jams, the Mala Rodriguez, Jesse Reyes. Like he
Jesse
really,
Ortiz?
No, Jesse. Reyes.
Oh, Jesse Reyes. Yeah, okay.
He really digs deep. But Nick, tell me a little bit about all the countries you hit. You know, you did Panama, Puerto Rico, but keep going.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, New York was special because we not only do we talk to some of the bigger stars that you might have heard of, like Fat Joe and N.O.R.E., but we also wanted to tell the stories of a lot of the pioneers. So, you know, someone like Mr. Schick, who was the first person to record a Spanish Spanish rhyme on record back in '81. Someone like Lee Quinones and Lady Pink, who were dope graph writers, Rocksteady crew. So once we planted kind of how the seed was birthed and developed in New York, then we went to Panama to tell the story of a lot of people give credit to Puerto Rico and rightfully so for reggaeton, but you can't tell the reggaeton story without talking about Panama because basically what happened was, you know, a lot of migrants from the Caribbean and from Jamaica went over to Panama to help build the canal, the Panama Canal and the railroads. And with them, they brought in reggae, right? But when you bring in reggae to a Spanish-speaking country, people want to have Spanish lyrics on it. So it went from reggae to reggae en español, which were just dubs. It was just translations of whatever was going on in the English language song became a Spanish version. But then what people did is they took the rhythms of reggae and started doing their own songs over it. And someone like Renato was one of the first artists to do that with a song called El Denny, which was 4 years before NWA dropped F the Police. He was talking about the corruption of police back in Panama. So it's just, wow. I think a series like this kind of gives you a global perspective of how what was going on in the U.S. wasn't just going on in the U.S. It went to different places and started to develop into everyone kind of made it theirs. So yeah, we went to Panama. From there, we went to Puerto Rico. And not only did we talk about reggaeton, but we talked about bomba y plena and some of the other factors that kind of helped birth reggaeton and how at first, you know, the government was trying to lock it down and not have it. And then from there, we go to Cuba. The hip hop scene in Cuba is crazy.
Right.
From there, we go to Spain. In Spain, we make the connections between flamenco also being from the streets. And now there's people who are mixing flamenco and Latin trap and doing all kinds of crazy stuff in Spain. From Spain, we go to Colombia. In Colombia, not only we're talking about reggaeton, but we're talking about they had a really solid foundation of like hip hop. And then they have other genres like chirimia and vallenato that kind of got influence. And then Nicky Jam went over there. And then the second wave of reggaeton kind of took off. From there, we go to Argentina, which is where I'm from. and we kind of connect the dots between, freestyle rap is really big in Argentina and in Mexico and in Spain also, so much so that they're selling out stadiums of people who are just like freestyle battling, selling out stadiums. So
Yes.
Like battling in the way that people are battling in the U.S. Is it the same or no?
No, Rosenberg. I'm going to step in there because I actually went to Madrid to be part of one of these competitions. An entire stadium for battle rap, straight battle rap.
So the same style though, like
Yes.
no beat, just like the
Yes.
ish talking.
Yes, incredible.
Well, they have different rounds. So one round could be no beats. Another round there'll be some beats underneath. Some rounds they'll have like words pop up on the screen. Some rounds you have to end your rhyme. You have to start your rhyme with the end of another rhyme. So they have a lot of like different things that they incorporate into their battle raps. But yeah, straight up battle raps. Like I'm talking about full stadiums just to watch people freestyle. And when you see kind of how that happened in Argentina in particular, it really reminds me of New York because it started with kids in a spot called Quinto Escalón, which means 5 blocks. So there were kids that were sitting on the stoops, like 5 stoops, with no record industry, no speakers, no nothing, just freestyling. And then a lot of the artists that really took off in Argentina actually came from that park. So it just goes to show you, just like when hip hop started, that all you need is some talent, desire, hustle, and you can build a whole industry. And then we end up the season in Mexico. And there's a lot of dope stuff that comes in Mexico, including how cumbia, which came from Colombia, went to Mexico and then se rebajó, which means it slowed down. So imagine kind of like a chopped up, screwed version of cumbia. So it's like all the way slowed down. And then you have someone like Santa Fe Clan like rapping on it. And on top of that, he's playing like an accordion. So it's like you get these fusions of music, which I think are really interesting throughout Latin America and Spain, but all have a strong connection to hip hop. And then you have a rapper in Oaxaca, an indigenous woman rapper in Oaxaca who's using hip hop to help preserve her indigenous language and to tell the new generation about their culture through hip hop. So it's like it's fascinating to see how the seeds of hip hop from New York and from the US have gone around Latin America and sprinkled with different cultures and now are birthed, all kinds of different subgenres.
As a hip hop nerd, Rosenberg, you're going to absolutely love this. Like, I really enjoyed because I got to see the New York episode and I just thought it was so cool to learn more about like people like Joe Conzo who took hip hop's, baby pictures. That's what, he's coined that from 1976. And to just really see these pioneers really talk about like the early beginnings. There's a lot of talk about all these like hip hop historians like writing their versions of it. But we don't necessarily always get to hear from the actual people who were there at the actual first jams and where it actually started.
It's amazing. So Nick, I want to get into the conversation about Latinos in the American hip hop origin story, essentially the hip hop origin story, because it's such a constant and sort of frustrating / controversial subject. But let me just ask you the annoying, general, impossible to answer radio question. So if you were to say, outside of the United States, but in talking about Latin America, what is like the number one hip hop city to go to in the Latin world? What city would you be forced to say is the one?
Oh man, that's it's hard to say the one city.
How about the one where I might find the most to do and find it sort of the most fascinating? You know what I mean? Like there's just a lot.
All right, I'll give you one. I don't think it's the biggest, but a place like Havana in Cuba, I think is really surprising because a lot of people aren't really tapped in because a lot of music from Cuba isn't really exported. But like to me, when I go there and I follow the scene there, it feels like you're back in the 80s in New York because the industry hasn't developed because there isn't really a lot of corporations coming in. There aren't a lot of record labels. So it's still the hunger of like people rapping in the streets and like that kind of hunger. I think it would surprise a lot of people, just the hunger in Cuba, but before all the record industry came, like imagine New York, people freestyling in the park, like you're getting that not only in Havana, but in a lot of Latin America because the industry hasn't developed as much. And some of the bigger cities, maybe, some record labels are starting to poach artists, but in other places, you really get that hunger that I personally felt like when I got in hip hop, where it was like, man, you're just doing it as a way to express yourself, as a way to survive. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this docuseries. It's called De La Calle because we really go to the neighborhoods where these cultures were birthed.
Okay, so then let's ask you this question too. And again, De La Calle is out right now on Paramount Plus. You can watch the whole series. And I know you delve into the Latinos and the formation of hip hop story. What is the most when you watch that conversation playing out, and it seems like there's a lot of it about, for some reason, people fighting against Latinos being part of the origin story in hip hop. What sort of frustrates you the most in that conversation, and were you able to uncover anything that you think will be really helpful for that conversation moving forward?
I had a simple mission. My mission was, let me talk to the people who are there, because anyone else who joins the conversation who wasn't there, it's like, what do you know? So it's like a lot of our pioneers are still alive. A few of them have passed away. But a lot of our pioneers are alive. So I was like, let me go talk to the people who were actually there. So not only do we talk to a lot of the pioneers who were there on the Latin side, but you have somebody like Grand Wizard Theodore, who's credited as inventing scratch. And he's pretty much saying, if you think Latinos weren't part of creating hip hop, you're a liar. He's like, I was there. So it's like, we can have this conversation all you want, and I'd love to have it. And I hope people watch the episode so then we can actually have a conversation when people see the people who've contributed to the culture. But part of the reason why I created this was because I kept hearing, oh, Latinos are visitors in hip hop, or, you know, Latinos are guests in hip hop. And it's like, you just weren't there and you don't know your history if you're saying that. Like, it's just flat out the way it is. Like, you know, we can go back to, you know, first of all, graffiti started 10 years before we give hip hop credit for when it started, right? So graffiti culture was already out there. There's people contributing to graffiti from hip hop. And then, you know, in the 70s, you have a lot of the groups had Latinos in them. Cold Crush Brothers, DJ Charlie Chase was a Puerto Rican DJ. So it's like, you have people like Disco Wiz. You have people like Mr. Schick, who I mentioned before. You have people like Whip a Whip. Like, Latinos were there. And I think one of the issues that we came across in the episode is, I think sometimes people see darker skin folks and they assume that they're Black and they don't have Latino background. And I think that's one of the things that when we talk to someone like a Jim Jones, who's you know, part Puerto Rican, we talk to someone like Dave East, who's part Dominican. It's like, there's a lot of people, especially in New York, who migrated from the Caribbean, who might be darker skinned, who still have Latino heritage. So it's like,
both. They're Black and Latino.
So
wow. Concept. Crazy.
Right.
You know, so it's like this idea that Latinos somehow weren't there. It's like, yeah, maybe for a while, Latinos weren't the biggest MCs at the time. And I think as hip hop evolved, you know, from the DJ being the front and center to the MC being front and center, I think in that transition, maybe some of the Latinos weren't, you know, as big as MCs until we get to like the Puns and the Fat Joes. But it's like, that doesn't mean that we didn't help contribute to the culture. Hip hop culture, last time I checked, isn't just MCing. It's DJing, it's breakdancing, it's graffiti. And in the New York episode, you will see Latinos and Latinas who contributed to all those elements from the early stages. So I'm happy to have this conversation. I'm obviously very passionate about it. And, you know, like Joe Conzo says at the end of episode 1, it's on us to tell the story. Like, we can't let other people tell our story. Like, that's why it was important for me to bring in Latino crews so that we can go tell the story and really provide a platform for our pioneers and the people who contributed to the culture to help tell that story so we can open this conversation. And there's people who didn't even make it on the documentary who also contributed. So it's like, we're just starting to peel the onion. But for me, it was important to really have something out there with the voices of the people who've contributed to hip hop since the early days.
Which I think is one of the most important things. Even after the screening of the New York episode, I remember talking to Charlie Chase on the side and being like, yo, you have to tell your story. Because at first, you know, a lot of the legends can be a little like, you know, not necessarily feel like in the best space. They feel like they're either overlooked or, you know, like it's so sad. I feel like we don't uplift our pioneers enough in hip hop. But we need to hear from the people who were actually there. And the way Nick captures these really candid conversations and like in their old apartments, digging up their old equipment, it's just fire, man. If you are a hip hop head, you have got to just go dive in and check it out. You will learn so much. And it's truly inspiring. And I've only seen, like I said, the first episode, but I just watching the first one gets you so excited. Like, I never, like, people like N.O.R.E. who were like, yo, he pulled some really amazing conversation there. I'll let you watch it for you to see how it felt like as a Black Latino having to navigate through those worlds. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's part of his success.
I remember when you saw it, you talking about that part specifically.
Yeah.
Nick, it sounds awesome.
Yay.
Super psyched to watch it. Yeah, the conversation around Latinos
It's
and
so
hip hop
cool, though.
is that the negative one that happens is one of those like worst moments in social media to me. Like that's to me what it's really about. It ends up becoming this dumb Twitter debate where
Yeah.
people just throw out trolly statements that are so divisive and counter to what hip hop's all about. And just sitting on the outside from my perspective, I'm like, are we really debating this? This is like
know.
such a crazy conversation. But I'm glad that you have a series that really gets into the essence and importance of the Latin contribution to hip hop because it is gigantic.
From the pioneers, which
Yeah,
is
exactly.
special.
And you're right; they're still around. Like,
Yeah.
there are some things where you're trying to talk about history, and you'll never know. But when these people are still around to tell the story, it's amazing that you provided a vessel for them to do that. So, Nick, congratulations!
We're
It's De
so
La
proud of
Calle,
you.
Paramount Plus right now. Thank you, man.
All 8 episodes are out. I'm so excited to watch, Nick. Thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you.